Hi guys, it's Professor Fernandez, and I am here to show you the second example of how to write a really good journal. You probably saw the first video. If you haven't seen the first video, go back because I say things and I preface the video by saying things. I say all the things. For the most part, the journal proves to be something difficult for students. It's not difficult once you figure it out, but it takes a while for students to figure it out. So I want to show you what a good journal is, some things that I'm looking for, some things not to do, some things to do better. So we're gonna look at a journal entry that got an A. And so let's do it. So let me share my screen with you. Let me share my screen with you. And hopefully I see it. Journal example 2. Okay, there you go. All right. This is the wrong one. Let me try it again. Are they both the same one? No. Save. Here it is. Okay. Whew, that was a little scary. All right, so I'm gonna preface this again by saying these are examples. This may or may not be the topic or the story or the poem or whatever for your journal this week. I want you to go back and read the assignment sheet. Please read the assignment sheet. Everything is in the assignment sheet. Read it 3 times. And then if you have questions, please ask questions. Okay, so again, let's go and look at what's going on here. You have the wonderful MLA formatting here, your name, my name. My name is Professor Fernandez. Please don't use my first name. It's Professor Fernandez. Then it's last name, page number, all the things. As I said in the previous video, your journal entry does not begin in the first line of your first paragraph. It begins at your title. So I really start grading at your name to make sure that you have MLA formatting done. But as far as content, I start grading at your title. So your title is not journal. Your title is not the name of the piece that you're talking about. There's an actual honest to goodness title. So a pro tip on doing titles, I would write the title last. After you've done the first draft of your journal, then I would go back and put a title, because a title can change quickly. So I would go back and do a title that you think would fit, and then look at it one more time before you turn it in to make sure that's the title you want, all right? So for this one, this particular student wrote about freedom of speech, and they wrote about I Am Very Real by Kurt Vonnegut, which is something that you're more than likely going to read this semester. And they wrote, they did not compare, it's not the right word, but they found the article called Former Officials File Suit Over the Lifelong Limits on the Words They Write by Charlie Savage. So she's talking specifically about freedom of speech and the First Amendment. And so I love how this particular student, which is a she, is her pronoun, how this particular student got into their journal. So she sets it up pretty quickly and pretty nicely. Freedom of speech is a topic that is controversial and many have fought over it. That is so true, right? So there's nothing controversial there. The freedom of speech is covered by the First Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, along with the freedom of assembly, religion, press, and the right to petition the government. Every day when we write, read, speak, we speak of our freedom of speech, and we do not realize it. Throughout the years, the limitations of how far we can push the coverage of our freedom of speech has caused debates around the country. Some people believe that the freedom of speech has no limit, but it has been exercised, and it should be exercised without any repercussion. Others believe that the freedom of speech should have a boundary and have consequences if it exceeds to something aggressive. So what is really cool about this is that she explains kind of like gives us context. I'm big on context. Context is everything, right? So she's really good at talking about um, the controversy right here. Some people believe that freedom of speech has no limit, and then others believe that freedom of speech should have a boundary and consequences if it gets aggressive. So she's giving us saying, oh, there's like this big back and forth. And so that helps introduce what the reading was that week. I Am Very Real, which is an essay written by Kurt Vonnegut, and then a title, or the title of the article. So again, just with the other one, she wrote the title and then who wrote it, and then she wrote the title of the article and then who wrote it first lines. The only thing wrong here, I would say, is that an essay kind of stands alone. You should really want to italicize that. But other than that, it's pretty good. So in her thesis, which starts right here, because she's introducing the two pieces she's going to talk about in this journal, she introduces them and then talks about, I hate to use that phrasing because she's literally saying this here, she is going to discuss what the whole rigmarole is. So that's really what a thesis is. A thesis has been, or thesi, or thesis, the act of putting a thesis together, is really, you need to think of it as a promise that you make to the reader. You are going to tell the reader, I'm going to talk about this, and you talk about it. That's all a thesis is. Yes, there's like different thesis structures for different types of essays, completely true. But at its essence, a thesis says to the reader, hey, I'm going to talk about this. That's what it is. And so what she says, she's going to talk about the First Amendment, more specifically the freedom of speech, and how the right is being deprived from the protagonists of the literature pieces. So she's talking about the First Amendment and the taking away of the freedom of speech, which is really cool. So I read this thesis and I'm like, ooh, girl, talk about it. So I was very excited. So again, here we have I Am Very Real is a well-written letter by Kurt Vonnegut that was directed towards the chairman of the Drake School Board, Mr. McCarthy. The whole purpose of the letter to Mr. McCarthy was to tell him that it was a harsh, un-American manner, that McCarthy demanded to dispose of Vonnegut's book, and that McCarthy must allow all ideas to circulate freely in your community and not merely in your own. All right, so there's a couple of things here. One, she is using 2 sentences to give me a summary, and you're limited to 2 sentences of summary, and she's putting it right at the beginning. So this is what it is, and this is how I know she's going to talk about. She's setting this up where she talks about one piece first and talks about the other piece second, and she's using she's talking about the first piece first, and she told us she was because she said it in the thesis here, right? And she is going to give us like a quick snippet. And part of this snippet, if I'm reading this correctly, yes, no, doesn't have context in here. So she doesn't have any context in here quite yet. Now, another thing I want to point out is that when she starts with the topic sentence here in this paragraph, she's telling us exactly what she's going to talk about. In this well-written letter by Kurt Vonnegut, she's already giving us her opinion. She thinks it's well-written. Here's the thing, and this is like a little thing that kind of, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard for me. When you, in your thesis, give me the first and last name of the author, after you've already introduced them in your thesis or your intro paragraph. Some people do it earlier on in the intro paragraph. Every time afterwards, you can just use your last name. So here, she could have just done this, Vonnegut, and been done. She doesn't have to say Kurt Vonnegut each time, okay? So let me put that here. She also did her MLA incorrectly. So this is all one, or this is one sentence here. Your MLA goes here, right? Your MLA, there's two schools of thought. She's using the first school of thought, which is your in-text citation goes right next to the information that you're giving out. The other school of thought, which is what I prescribe to, or subscribe to, sorry, is that your in-text citation goes at the end of the sentence. So what you want to do here, if you subscribe to the first one, the correct way to do it is doing it outside here. You want to do it outside the quotations because it's not part of the quotation. Because I don't subscribe to that, and you could probably do what I tell you, I put it at the end of the sentence that way. So it's last name, and then the period goes at the end. Right, so that makes sense. So she gives us two really good quotes from Vonnegut's well-written letter here. And so she gives us a really good summary. Okay, so let's go on to see what she writes about here. In his book, Vonnegut used vulgar language which resulted in the burning of his book at Drake High School. What I understand, let me stop there. This is her sentence of context, by the way. So again, it's very formulaic, but it's very, very good what the student is doing, which is why they got an A. They introduced it really well. So a recap, right? They introduced it really well. They kind of gave perspective, gave a context of what they're about to talk about. Then they gave a really good thesis sentence where the name of the piece that we read and then the piece that she found, the article that she was going to use is put in there. Plus the full name of the authors are in there. And they're right next to their respective pieces. And then she told us what she was going to talk about, right? That both of these pieces talk about First Amendment, specifically the freedom of speech and how the freedom of speech has been denied. Okay, so fantastic thesis. Then in the body paragraph, she starts off saying what she's going to write about, right? So she's setting it up. She's saying that first body paragraph, she's going to talk about the Vonnegut piece, the I Am Very Real piece. The second body paragraph, she's going to talk about the article that she found. So that first body paragraph, which is what we're on now, she does 2 sentences worth of summary. So the summary doesn't go beyond 2 sentences. So you got 2 sentences. Really, one is really good, but 2 sentences, that's it. No more summary. Then she gives us 1 sentence of context, right? And context is maybe what the piece is having a conversation with, maybe what the piece is alluding to, maybe what inspired the writer to write about it, whatever piece or context that we need to talk about, or that she needs to talk about this piece or to analyze this piece in a certain way. She talked about the idea that the book, which is Slaughterhouse-Five, was burnt at Drake High School by the superintendent because it contained vulgar language. That isn't really here. It's just, you know, it was talked about the letter, which is the piece that was written. The context here was, oh, by the way, this is why he read this, right? So then she talks a little bit about her analysis of this piece. What I understand that Vonnegut is saying is that his freedom of speech was violated. Vonnegut's book was a form of expression and a way to talk about the events happening in the country at that time. I do believe that his freedom of speech was somewhat deprived from him. The words of Vonnegut's were not meant to offend or put anyone in danger. Okay, a couple thoughts here. Obviously, she meant book here, Vonnegut's book, right? So she missed a word. So this tells me she wrote it really, really quickly. I wish she had expanded her thought here, because this is the beginning of a really good thought. This is the beginning of her talking about how his freedom of expression and freedom of speech was violated, and what that means, and how taking away the freedom of speech by burning his book says something about whatever, right? So I wish she had talked a little bit about it here. Now, when it comes to the analysis part, some of you guys are going to want to do, oh, this is a simile, and this is what the simile means, and this is imagery, and this is diction, and da 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 da, and things you were taught about in high school. You are welcome to do that, but I'm going to say this, like I said in the other video, this is not a literary analysis. I do not want a literary analysis. I do not want a literary analysis. I want you to analyze it in a way that talks about the bigger idea, the theme, the topic, how that's in play today. Because everything that we're reading here, even though it may have been written during the civil rights movement or have been, ooh, I dumped something, sorry, have been written during the civil rights movement or has been written in another way or in another time, pertains to the world today. Really shaking. I have actually no idea what I just dumped on the floor. Oh, just my keyboard. Don't worry about it. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so now she's going to the second body paragraph, and she is going to write about the article that she found. Again, article, not opinion piece, not a column, not a piece that says, I believe this, I think this, I did this, none of that. An actual news article. So it's giving you information, something that gives you information. So it's former officials file suit over the lifelong limits of the words they write. It's a news article. Yes, it is, because I did check this. Speaking about former officials who worked for national agencies who dealt with national security and former military veterans who filed a suit against a free publication review system and how the system goes against their right of free speech. This is a long sentence, but it's a summary. She kept it to one sentence. And I think the next one is also, oh, this is a little bit of context. Just reading ahead. So this is a summary. Again, with MLA, I would have preferred this to be at the end of the sentence. And even if she puts it right next to the item, this is not where it goes. It goes outside the quotation. Boom, done, right? So that's correct. So then she goes on to say, in the article, the following statement, reviewing officials who can delay or discriminate against lower ranking people who criticize government actions while speedily clearing favorable memoirs, basically says that the officials that review the work of the formal officials discriminate against the people who did not support the same ideas as them. So it's a little bit more summary, but it has some context, kind of like, this is what this really means, and this is kind of what's in play here. A couple things here. This sentence is really long and it's kind of complicated. I think I may have written a note here that says, this is really awkward. You want, when you're writing sentences, and this is just a style thing, you want clear sentences. Jane ran to the store. There is no question about what Jane was doing and where she was going, right? So you want those type of sentences because it doesn't leave anything to misinterpretation and the writing is very, very clear. And so you want to do that. I am not a fan of the complex sentences. I hate complex sentences. If you think an English professor wants complex sentences and you're going to put 10,000 clauses in a sentence, all you're going to do is end up confusing me and frustrating me. As a grader, I do not like them. I like clear. If your sentences literally says, Jane ran to the store, I am happy. Why? Because that is clear. You're actually telling me what you want to and need to tell me, rather than adding a couple of clauses. So something like that, something like the sentence, I am not a fan of at all. So watch it. Okay, so she goes on by saying, this to me means that the official, hold on, let me highlight that so you guys know where I'm at. This to me means that the former official's freedom of speech was somewhat revoked. The words written by the former officials were manipulated and rearranged in a way that took the whole idea of freedom expression, freedom of, sorry, the whole idea of free expression and speech. So another pro tip, if you read this out loud and you kind of trip over the words, just like I did, more than likely you need to rewrite that section because it's not as clear as you think it is, okay? So my thoughts here, she's got 2 sentences here, and what I wish she had done is to talk about it more and what she believes could be the implication of these officials not being able to use part of their freedom of speech. And then, yeah, that would be great. I need it to expand. What I wish she also had done here is talked about both of them here. So she really needed like a third body paragraph. Didn't have to be long, but you know, because I'm not expecting like a half a page of a body paragraph, but something that talks about both of them at the same time and give me kind of her opinion about both of them. How the freedom of speech from Vonnegut, how his was denied, and the freedom of speech being denied of both of this official could, you know, what does that mean? Is it justified? How do we know if it's justified or not? So get into those ideas in there, and that could have been a really cool paragraph. Let's look at the last paragraph here. After reading the passages, I did come up with a question for Kurt Vonnegut, since I found him as a well-spoken, educated man. That's a weird sentence, by the way. What would be Vonnegut's solution to the balancing of freedom of speech? That's a good question. I almost wish she would have used that question for her third body paragraph and attempted to answer, because that would have been really cool to read. What do I mean by that? I mean, how can we as a society find a way to allow the freedom of speech without running the risk of offending someone? That's also a really good question. So I love, just like the last, the first video, the example from the first video, I love how this ends with questions, because that shows me that you're thinking on a deeper level, right? Just because the pieces may give you answers doesn't mean that they don't give you more questions. And in fact, if you go back to the elements of argument, yes, elements of argument, the idea of a claim is the answer to a question that is not answerable, right? So, for instance, the issue is what I mean. So, for example, if you're saying, why is the sky blue? Well, that's super answerable. You can literally put that answer in Google and find the answer, or question in Google and find the answer. And it's science, right? The answer is science. But something like this, how can we as a society find a way to allow the freedom of speech without running the risk of offending someone, is a really good issue, because it's not something that you can go to Google and find, go to an old school encyclopedia to find, go into the databases and find. It's something that you debate. And the answer of it, the claim of it, the claim is the answer to an issue, is what argument is all about. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. So this received an A. There's a couple things that I wish this person would have done, and I think I've mentioned that. I love it when you guys expand on things. Like this to me, right here, when she's talking about the last one, this last article, she literally has 2 sentences. She spent most of this just giving us either a review of it or putting it in context. There's 2 sentences on what she actually thinks. I am more interested in this blue part than I am in this part. So really it should be a balance. This blue part should be the review, right? You should have 2 sentences of review, 1 sentence of context. Give me the rest of your paragraph. Like, give me your thoughts, man. Give me your thoughts. It's an argument class. Argue. Okay, so I will put this in D2L, and I hope that this was helpful. Let me know if you need something a little bit clearer. If you don't quite know what to do yet. These are not easy if you've never written like this before. It takes a while to get there, but once you get there, you got it. So let me know. All right. Bye, guys.